This is kind of an unusual letter. It's not like any other letter I've ever received. James basically says, hi, you're going to have problems. A few years back, I was in the grocery store, and I came across what was clearly a rookie father. And he had his little boy in the seat of the cart and had him strapped in, and his little boy was having none of it. He was screaming and yelling and throwing his arms around, and I was watching. I thought, boy, this is great fun. I'm going to follow him around. And he'd go up and down the aisles, and he had to be careful because if he got too close, the kid would take his arms and just knock everything off the shelves. And the father kept saying, just be calm, Albert. Everything will be fine, Albert. It's going to be okay, Albert. And the kid was screaming and yelling, and I was having a great time following him around. In fact, I wasn't even done getting all my stuff, and I followed him right into the checkout line. And he got up to the checkout line, and the cashier said to the father, look, I really want to commend you on your handling of Albert today. I know that Albert's been a little bit difficult, and it's apparent that you're a young father, and I just want to say that I'm very proud of the way that you dealt with Albert today. And in the most deadpan face you ever say, he looked right at the cashier and said, I'm Albert. You see, James is writing his book for times like that in our lives, when things are falling apart, when things are building up, and we just don't feel like we can handle it anymore. Well, James tells us about 3 facts of life that we need to know. First, problems are inevitable. James doesn't say consider it pure joy if you face problems. He says whenever you face problems, because problems are going to have. In fact, you probably have 3 before you get home from church today. They're inevitable. In his book called The Road Less Traveled, M. Scott Peck starts with 3 words. Life is difficult. Yes, it is difficult. Problems are inevitable. We're going to have them no matter what we do. Problems are not only inevitable, problems are unpredictable. Consider it pure joy whenever you have trials of many kinds. Anybody ever have a car break down? We had one break down on Thursday night. $1,200 later, it's working just fine. I didn't budget for that this month because it was unpredictable. We just never know when they're going to happen. The Greek here, when it says when you fall unexpectedly into, or when you encounter trials of various kinds, is probably better translated fall unexpectedly into. It's the same Greek word used in the Good Samaritan parable, you know, where the guy goes out and he's heading across country and all of a sudden the robbers attack him. The word there is he fell unexpectedly into this attack. Well, problems are inevitable, problems are unpredictable, but problems can be productive. Problems can be productive. If you're taking notes, circle the word can. They can either be productive or destructive. You see, we have a choice. We can be miserable in the midst of a problem, or we can try to figure out how to make our life better as a result of them. Here's the theme of the book of James. God's goal for your life, according to James, is maturity. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking in anything. I think maturity is a little bit misunderstood in our culture. Maturity has nothing to do with age. I know some immature old folks. Maybe you do too. Has nothing to do with status, has nothing to do with looks. Did you ever, when you were growing up, go to church with one of those people who had that look on their face and you thought, boy, they must be spiritually mature? Either that or they're having vinegar for lunch. Doesn't have anything to do with status or maturity or even the way we look. It's an issue of internal character. You see, James spends his entire book saying, look, if you want to grow up, if you want to be mature, if you want to be a solid gold person for God, here's the prescription. And James tells us that the sign of a mature person is handling pressure gracefully. I always thought the mark of a mature Christian was having a really big Bible to carry around. I always thought the sign of a mature Christian was those big bumps in the pew seat where they always sit because they were there so much. I always thought the sign of a mature Christian was going to seminary and having all kinds of letters before and after your name after you're graduated. But James tells us that the sign of a mature Christian is someone who handles pressure gracefully. Doesn't get uptight, doesn't lose their cool, doesn't fly off the handle when pressured situations come. Now, I'm not all that mature yet. My wife, she's not here, but if you ask her, she'll tell you. The other night, we went out to go get dinner, and I walked up to the maitre d', and I said, do you serve crabs here? He said, yeah, sure, come on in, we'll serve anybody. How do you react to pressure? Are you skeptical or are you supportive? Are you hard-hearted or are you soft-hearted? Do you grumble or are you grateful? Do you get angry or do you stay affirming? Because problems and pressure will either develop you or they'll destroy you. They'll either develop you or they'll destroy you. I'm missing a slide. There was supposed to be one in there. I think you got to fill in the blanks for that one. Problems and pressure will either develop you or they'll destroy you. We've seen it in all different kinds of people's lives and in their relationships. We've seen it in their marriages. Problems come up and it destroys them. We've seen it in relationships with their children, having a problem with their kid, and it destroys their family. Difficult times at jobs and people's careers are destroyed because they weren't developed by the problems, they were destroyed by them. Now, the key in this is how we respond to pressure. In that passage from 1 Kings, and I do hope that you'll read it later, we're going to talk about it a little bit, there's a wonderful example of destructive responses to pressure. The story's about the prophet Elijah, and just before this happens, Elijah has slain? He killed 1,000 prophets of Baal all by himself. One Elijah, 1,000 prophets of Baal. One Elijah, 1,000 bad guys. At the end of the story, one victorious Elijah, 1,000 dead prophets of Baal. He's just done a pretty amazing thing, and then something happens that destroys him. Remember, he's just killed all of these bad guys, and he gets a letter from Queen Jezebel. And Jezebel says, I'm not happy with you. You're dead if I ever see you. And I'm coming to get you. And what does he do? He takes off, flees to the wilderness. He makes 4 destructive choices in his decisions. First, he makes rash decisions. He goes into the wilderness, gets down on his knees before God and prays, Dear God, I can't take it anymore. Just kill me now. For those of you who are keeping score, God, just kill me now is a rash decision. That's it. I give up. That's become a national phenomenon in America today. If our marriage is a little difficult, that's it. I give up. I'm getting a divorce. If our relationship with our parents is bad, that's it. I'm running away from home. If we're having trouble at work, that's it. I quit. When life gets tough, a very wise man once told me, don't make decisions. When life gets tough, don't make decisions. Because if I would have made decisions when life was tough, I would be divorced, I wouldn't have any children, and I would have left the ministry a long time ago. Elijah makes rash decisions. Secondly, he runs from responsibility. He runs from responsibility. He takes off and he hides in a cave. Things get tough and he runs away. I know fathers who've done that. I know mothers who've done that. And I know pastors who've done that. Things get tough and they're gone. And then look what happens in verse 10. He says, the people of Israel have abandoned your covenant. They've destroyed your places of worship. They've murdered your prophets. And I'm the only one left. And now they're going to kill me. If I give up as a national phenomenon, blaming others is a national disease. Elijah blames everyone else for his problems. We are a nation of victims. Few of us will take responsibility for our actions. It's my parents' fault. It's my children's fault. It's my work's fault. It's my pastor's fault. It's everybody's fault but my own. As long as we blame others, healing cannot occur. Can't get through our problems if we're busy blaming everybody else. When we blame anybody else, it absolves me of the responsibility for dealing with the problem. Therefore, it never gets dealt with. If you go to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, the first step in recovery from alcoholism is admitting that you have a problem. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got some problems. We need to admit them if we ever want to solve them. And finally, Elijah loses perspective. He says, I alone am left. I'm the only one who loves you, God. And God's response in verse 18 is, I have 7,000 faithful in Israel. Elijah thinks things are 7,000 times worse than they are. That's exactly the way it is with us. We face a problem and we think it's 7,000 times worse than it actually is. Just review: destructive responses, making rash decisions, running from responsibility, blaming others, and losing perspective. And then James, and I love James because it is so practical, he gives us 4 developmental ways to respond to pressure and problems. First, he says, consider it pure joy. He says, when you face a problem, rejoice. He's not saying don't worry, be happy. He's not saying don't fake it. Someone once said to me, cheer up, things could get worse. I cheered up, things got worse. He's saying rejoice. Have an attitude of joy about your situation that you're facing because you have a choice. Life is filled with problems, and we can either rejoice or regret. You get to choose the emotions that you walk through life with. You can choose joy or you can choose misery. A lot of times we look back at the tough times in our lives and say, you know, I was miserable during that time, and it didn't make things any better. I wonder what would have happened if I would have been joyful during that time. Viktor Frankl was a prisoner in the Nazi concentration camps. And he wrote a book about it, and he said, they took my home, they took my clothes, they took all my possessions, they took away my children, they took away my wife, but they couldn't take how I chose to respond to my situation. He said, I was freer than the guards on the other side of the fence because they were captives of Hitler's Nazi attitude machine. And then he wrote this: our ultimate freedom is our ability to choose our attitude. You say, well, that's easy to say, Keith, but how do you do that? This is what I love about James, because not only does he just tell us to rejoice, he shows us how. He says, consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds, because you know. We need to rejoice and we need to realize, because you know. You see, we know some things about God. We don't know a lot of things about God, but we know some things about God. And one of the things we know about God is that He cares for us. Rejoice because you realize that God cares for you. Have you ever just not felt good and you couldn't figure out why, so you went to the doctor? And you went to the doctor and you said, you know what? I just don't feel well and I can't figure out why. So they put you in the room and they gave you one of those nice little paper dresses. And then the doctor came in and he started playing those doctor games. First he did the breathe real deep game. Then he did the let's see if we can make you kick game. And he did a lot of those doctor games, and if they did a lot of those doctor games and they still couldn't figure out what was wrong with you, they play one doctor game that I hope I don't ever have to play again. It's called the rubber glove game. And haven't you ever been to the doctor and they're doing these kinds of terrible things to you and you just want to say to them, stop, you don't know me this well. But you know what? I've never said that, because I know that the doctor has my health at heart. He's got my best interests at heart. It's the same thing with God. Maybe you're here this morning and you've been playing some of those God games with God, and some of them aren't very comfortable. You've been going through some tough times. Well, rejoice because you know, realize. The great physician is working on you, and though it may be uncomfortable, He has your best interests at heart. Rejoice, realize, and third, request. James says in verse 5, if any of you lacks wisdom, ask. The problem is we always ask the wrong question. We ask the why question. Now look, I've been to seminary twice, and I still don't know how to answer the why question, because it's the wrong question. We very rarely learn why. The appropriate question is what? What can I learn from this? What are you trying to teach me, God? What can I do to be a better person in the midst of all of this stuff? And if you ask God the what question, I guarantee you lunch at the drive-up window of your choice, you'll get a whole lot better answer than when you're asking the why question. Rejoice. Realize. Third, request. Ask that what question. And finally, relax. When you ask, you must believe and do not doubt. Just relax. Kick back a little bit. Take a deep breath in the midst of all of the problems that you're facing. James says that you'll need this wisdom and you'll need faith. About 20 years or so ago, gosh, it's been a little longer now than that, I was a youth pastor and I was in a very, very difficult church situation. And I had the opportunity that fall to go to the National Youth Workers Convention. It was a 5-day convention, and all the way through this I was going to different seminars, and the question I was really asking is, am I cut out for this ministry stuff? Because there's all these things going on that I just can't handle. I don't even have anything to say about these problems that are happening, but they're affecting me. And on the last evening of the National Youth Workers Convention, before the closing speaker, the music guest was a local black Southern Baptist choir. And they got up on the stage and they were in the robes, and there was about 580 of them up there. And as those black Southern Baptist choirs will do, they started singing. and swaying back and forth. And they were singing, "Put it all in his hands. Put it all in his hands." And like those black Southern Baptist choirs do, they sang that about 37,000 times. Put it all in his hands. And then the soloist walked up and she sang, "You got problems?" And the choir said, "Put it all in his hands." Is your life difficult? Put it all in his hands. And after about 4 hours of that, I thought to myself, I ought to give that a try. And so right there on the floor of the convention center with 2,000 other youth pastors all around me, I got down on my knees and I put it all in God's hands. Did I still have the problems I had to deal with? Yep. Did I still have to go back and work in a difficult church situation? Yep. Did I still have to decide whether I was cut out for ministry or not? Yep. But the difference was I had put it all in God's hands. Now, there's a verse I want you to memorize. It's Psalms 55:22. It's very simple, and it goes like this: "Cast all your cares on him because he cares for you." Cast all your cares upon him because he cares for you. Some of you are here this morning and you are weighted down. The difficulties that you've been facing in life are crushing you. Cast all your cares on him because he cares for you. James would say, how you respond to that stuff shows your spiritual maturity. The most mature thing you can do is cast all your cares upon him because he cares for you. Got problems in your life? Anybody that doesn't? I've got a couple I could share with you. We're all going to face problems. They're inevitable. They're unpredictable, but they can be productive if we rejoice and request and relax. And there's one other I forgot. But hopefully you took good notes.